Hi, this is Robert Kiyosaki, and you're listening to Capital Hacking. This is the most important thing you can listen to today.
Here's the one.
I have a dream.
With great power comes great responsibility.
I could do this all day.
This is it. Don't get scared now.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom.
Cinderella story out of nowhere.
It's in the hole. That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Capital Hacking begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the big show, John Edwin. It is great to be here, buddy.
Oh, Josh, it's awesome. Always co-hosting the Capital Hacking podcast with you. Today we had Jane Wells, and we could do 5 shows with Jane because there's so much content
Jane
that you guys are going to learn about.
Yeah, Miss Jane Wells Schooley is a treasure. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite things she gets into, this is the most entrepreneurial, dynamic story of all time, is buying. Picture this, folks. Picture they go to a bank and they're pitching the idea of buying an abandoned, what was a quarry, is now one of the largest, like, man-made lakes, basically. And the business plan is to do a diving school. We don't want to spoil it, but it was a wild success.
Wild success. And I've been there with my family, and I didn't even know Jane started this.
Yes. What an entrepreneur. What a creator. So I think that story is great. Here's the part we wanted to bring the story to you, you great listeners. Jane has truly some of the best experience, and she has now dedicated her life to something called difference maker coaching.
Let's go.
You're going to love it. Learn and enjoy. Jane Wells Schooley. I've been loving this lady for years and years and years, John. I'm so glad we have her on the big show.
It is exciting. And Jane, you know that I've been trying to get you on the Capital Hacking here for a few months, and we're just delighted. We're honored that you're on the show. Can you give our listeners a little background of who you are?
Sure. If you out there are listening to this and you think you have to be on a certain path to get to success, you really don't. So I want you to know that my path is varied as they come. I've never had a resume in my life. I have 3 principles that lead my life and the decisions I make, and it's based on a foundation of relationships. And so I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather and father were grocery store owners, and my other grandfather was a mechanic. And my mother was one of the 3% of American women who graduated from college when she was that age. So I come from a curious lot, immigrants, all immigrants, both sides of the family. And from there, I got my master's degree at Penn State, and at the age of 20, signed a contract to be on the full-time faculty at Penn State.
Wow.
And I did that for 7 years. And I tried to create things, but academia is very slow. So if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, it sort of drives you nuts. So before there was anything called women's studies, I created a course, and I had to get a history teacher to go with me because I knew the women part, he knew the history part. So we were a great
What
team.
year would that have been, Jane, if you want to?
That would have been 1974. I would think. Yeah.
What a leader. What a leader.
Yeah, I was the first woman hired at that campus at Penn State since 1905 full time.
Wow.
So it was an interesting time. And from there, while I was doing that, I got there was something that happened. There's always something that happens that got me interested in women's rights. So I became active, the local president, and became active in that. And when I was doing that part-time, obviously as a volunteer, my partner and I was one of the first 3 franchises for bookkeeping and accounting of the company called Comprehensive Business Services. And my partner had to actually put his CPA in escrow because we weren't allowed at that time to have that. And I didn't know anything about sales or accounting or bookkeeping, but I became the vice president of sales and got my sales training. And that was incredible. And it really gave me what I needed to take the next step as I was elected the national political and legislative vice president for the largest feminist organization in the world, which meant I had a huge budget. I had a political action committee of $1 million.
Wow.
You're guessing that I'm still in my mid-20s, right?
So dynamic.
So while that was happening, there was a ERA campaign going on. I had to learn to lead the largest march in feminist history in Washington. So
Wow.
I actually have a philosophy: as long as you can get the plane to take off, I can learn to fly before it lands.
I like that.
That's sort of my philosophy. So it's I just go with the flow, right? I seize the opportunity. That's what I believe in, seizing the opportunity. From there, we sold that, and I became that. Living in Washington, D.C. for a while, then I became director of the largest political party in Pennsylvania, and I ran for Congress after that.
Wow.
That makes me 30-ish, and I ran for Congress and lost. So I needed great experience, though. I needed a new career. Was not homeless, but jobless. So I found one of my donors was owned a real estate company, and I became licensed and National Rookie of the Year in that franchise. And then I became a broker and opened my own company in 3 years. So now I'm somewhere in my mid 30s. You'll never fit this in.
I'll tell you what, though, because I love where it's going too. Because we've been
So
partners on projects together in real estate, and I love that. But I can't get over you were the Rookie of the Year.
yeah, in units and volume
And
for
that's
gallery of homes.
incredible. So wait a second. See, I had it backwards a little bit because of the famous Bob Wells as your brother.
Oh yeah. Well,
I
he
thought he
came
got you into
after.
real
He
estate.
came to join me. I didn't join him.
You brought the famous Bob Wells
That's
into
right.
real estate.
And the famous Usha Patel.
I think
Yeah.
they're lovely
Wow.
people. So thank you for bringing them into real estate.
Yeah.
And from that, what I know about you is just dynamic. And look, recently you just shared with me that you also just want to make sure you share the journey. Not only did you carpe ocasi,
Onum. Yeah. Onum.
you
Yeah.
got to teach that
Okay.
because I feel like that's what your whole life is about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you want me to continue a little bit
Yes,
of what
yes,
happens
please.
next?
Yes.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. So in the midst of this, right before the political campaign, my partner and I purchased 100 acres in an industrial park that included a 50-acre lake. And for those of you out there who think you're nuts with your vision, I can tell you that putting together a business proposal for a bank
Wait till you hear this, folks.
done by a CPA, right? We go and sit in front of the bankers and they say, okay, they've got the proposal in front of them. By the way, no one has opened it. And they say, well, what's the project? And we say, scuba diving in Pennsylvania.
By the way, I know the end of the story. This is the most unique pivot. Okay. I'm so proud of you. Finish. This is the best.
What do you do now? Because you have no money to start this thing. And by the way, the purchase was under $100,000.
Good
If
for
that
you.
was curious for you, but we have this thing now, and we had piles of fill from a mining operation because it used to be a quarry, so you couldn't really walk flat on this land. So we needed money, and we finally figured out that what we could do is buy a bulldozer. And if we bought a bulldozer, the bank would loan us the money. As you know, they like stuff like
They
that.
like stuff, right?
They like stuff. So we bought the bulldozer. We hired a guy to operate the bulldozer. We cleared off the land. And, where people would normally, who aren't entrepreneurs, would see this pile of fill and dirt and nothing. And where we saw a vision, we saw thousands of scuba divers coming in to use this place and enjoy it. And so that was happening sort of simultaneously with my then opening with Bob and Usha and some other investors, the Keller Williams office in Allentown. And then after Bob, I became the CEO for 2.5 years of that company. And then what happened then? Then I became the product.
Before you go too far, so this amazing entrepreneurial endeavor is called Dutch Springs, right?
Yes.
When you guys hold on, let's stop for a second.
John, do you picture this?
Dutch
What they bought?
Springs. I was thinking that can't be the Dutch Springs where it's the quarry where I used to
It
teach my
is,
kids,
yes.
and the water's freezing cold there, but it's amazing and it's
It's
super.
a lake, John.
Okay, well, it's super clear. And we've had such an amazing time because they have all these
Yes,
inflatables.
that was the development of the aqua park. That came after the 40,000 divers.
I thought for sure you guys were talking about a different Dutch spring.
No,
That's
go back.
amazing.
So you don't own it anymore. I know the
We
punchline here,
sold
but
it.
you
Yeah.
sold it. But you had it for how many years, Jane?
Approximately 1980.
Okay.
Yeah.
A full life cycle, full business.
Mhm.
Crazy idea, John. So what was it really? Was it an infilled quarry? Is that what it was? The water
Well, no,
infilled this
actually,
quarry?
by definition, a quarry is empty.
Okay.
It's a hole that people are mining in. So if there was any water, it's being pumped out during the mining
Right.
operation, right? And a lake is a body of water surrounded by land.
Okay.
So once the quarry fills up, it's no longer a quarry.
Okay. But it
It's a
was,
lake.
right?
I knew it was
What
a
was
quarry.
it
I knew it
first?
was at some point. Yeah, amazing.
It was a quarry at first. There was a giant cement plant right next to it. I mean, if you could imagine every single person telling us we were insane. I mean, there was
Well,
not just the bankers, everybody.
the good
Uh,
news is it is insane, and yet the good news is you know how to overcome
Yeah.
Herculean odds. Because what a crazy idea! So you turned it into a diving school, and
No, a
it actually.
diving operation. The school came later.
Oh my gosh!
That became a profit center later.
Yeah. So what does the business end up becoming? What was its peak
Okay.
of operation?
Okay, at the peak of operation, you still had the thousands of divers from 5 states, right? They were still
Wow.
on the other end of the lake. About 60,000 kids, John,
Wow.
came to we developed an aqua park, which was giant inflatables on the water, which, by the way, we were on vacation and I noticed some of those things in the ocean. And I said, oh, what a great idea. So we walked over there, find out the brand on the inflatables, and came back and developed. By the way, we're still having trouble with these banks asking us if we're going to be successful. Now, this has got to be 20 years later, and we're operating a multi-million-dollar business, still asking us,
Oh, I know.
about this. But then this was a lesson learned. We finally went to the Poconos because the Lehigh Valley wasn't a recreation place by nature. The Poconos was skiing and all of
Right.
that. So
Right.
we finally aligned with the right people who
Okay.
understood the type of business that we had. But the aqua park was because, when you're dealing with government and government, you have to have so many regulations, right? Well, they were not regulating anything on the water, just on the land.
Okay.
So we could put hotels on the water. We could put anything on the water. But if we wanted to put something on the land, it became a bigger challenge. So we
Interesting.
set up, first of all, we had the admission for the divers, right? So the dive shops were our primary client. That was the profit center there. Then we had the air, because you have to get air in your tank. So we had air as a profit center. Then we had food as another profit center in the very beginning. Then we added the aqua park. Well, when you add kids, you have to add food, real food, right? You have to
Right.
add stuff. So we bought 2 national food franchises,
Did you really?
Noble Roman's Pizza and Toscano Sandwiches.
I didn't know that.
And then it seemed like, okay, well, we've got all these people here, so now shouldn't we be doing something else? So because my background is communication, team building, et cetera, so I learned that. So we learned that. So now I figured, okay, we could have youth team building. We could set up a challenge course, so we could set up a high ropes course. That was a challenge with regulations.
Oh,
You can
yes.
but anyway, we did that. That became another. The youth, that was North Star Youth Development. That was a whole different division. Then we had the 2 national franchises, different profit center. And then I thought, well, if we already have the challenge course, who am I good with? I'm not good with kids per se in my teaching, instructing. So we had the youth division, so why not just go corporate, And so I set up North Star Team Development, founded that company, hired someone to reach out to corporations, and we did experiential team building, which
I
was
love it.
completely different than what they were hiring at corporation. They were hiring lecturers,
Right.
where everything we did was teaching people in an experiential way. Totally different. So we had a great market and we had some great corporate clients to do that. And so that became another profit center. And then somewhere in there, I went and got my international coaching certification because I knew that if I wanted to coach corporate executives, I had to compete, especially because we had a lot of German-based companies here, and almost all their coaches had PhDs. So I had a master's, but no PhD. So I thought I have to educate myself and get my international coaching certification. And I did that. And then I could present myself as an internet. And then they got to choose between the German coaches and me. And fortunately for me, they chose me.
Wow.
So that became another part of the team development, because obviously it's hard to create teams that work if the leadership is weak, right?
Take a deep
So
breath, everybody. I mean, it's hard for those people driving and not picturing the dynamic nature of your entrepreneurial gifts. So Dutch Springs, I'm looking at it again. The pictures are just amazing. You know, the thing that goes through my mind, Jane, is how did you get the insurance companies to back you?
That was a curiosity for me.
Oh,
You
well,
guys should Google it. It was really impressive what these guys built.
well, I will tell you that I'm going to have the numbers. This was like 1980s, so I'm going to have the numbers somewhat wrong here. So don't hold me to the exact. But if I remember, the first time we tried to get insurance before all the other stuff, right? I think they were wanting us to pay $30,000 a year, but it didn't cover the water.
Oh my gosh! In the 80s, 30,000.
Yeah, I think
that would
that's
be
what it
very
was.
high. Yes, very
That's
high.
really high.
And
it was ridiculous. In other words, they did not want to insure.
they didn't want to
That
do it.
was
Right.
that was the answer. So I don't think we did. I think that we figured that because we were not worried about twisted ankles at the time, and because the value of what we bought was so low at the
Yep.
time,
Yeah, to take
right?
some calculated risk there.
Yeah, you take some calculated risk, and what's the worst that could happen if they twist their ankle and a groundhog hole? Not so much, right? The real issue was in the diving.
It was in the diving.
Yeah, except we had only students with instructors at the time. So
Okay.
there were two deep pockets before they got to us.
I see.
And that was the instructor's insurance and the dive
Got
shop's
it.
insurance. So at that time, we just thought, okay, calculated risk. And it's exactly what happened. In any recreation, you've got another variable that you guys may not have in your businesses. And ours is that there are deaths. There's
Oh,
just,
yeah.
if you own a ski slope, if you own any boat, if you own any of that, something is going to happen. And it's actually predictable.
Oh, wow.
So a certain number of years will go by and you're likely to have that kind of stuff.
Right.
So fortunately, we were able to be the first to have what amounts to be a scuba patrol, like a ski patrol. But
Okay.
we had dive masters who were on the shore and observing what was happening
Okay.
and looking. But everything's happening underwater. But if something happens, they come to the surface, there's an issue. We also had EMTs on site.
Okay.
So that aligns, by the way, with my value system of you can go cheap. You can think that, okay, we don't need scuba patrol. We don't need the EMTs. We'll just call an ambulance. You can do that, but you're increasing your risk dramatically, right? If you have an EMT on site, then when something happens to someone, you show immediately to the legal world anyway that you did everything you could. The thing I loved about it was that most of the accidents were not diving related. There were people who had heart attacks. There were people who were overweight, and exerted themselves. There was some, if I recall, there was some very young person around the age of 30 that had 90% blockage in a carotid artery or something. And so they had an incident. So a lot of the incidents that we had that weren't fatal were typical things where people were doing recreation and maybe they were overexerting themselves or didn't know their health condition.
No,
right?
what a tough topic, to be honest with you. That is
Yeah,
a very
very
tough topic. How many people did you employ?
Oh, well, this is the fun part if you guys are listening out here,
Sounds
because
like subcontractors almost.
if you're thinking, we had a team, we had an operations manager. Now, remember, there were different stages in this based on the size of the operation, but we had an operations manager, and that was the outside, all the grounds and everything, and the scuba diving under the water stuff. And then we had a person who was managing all the people on the surface. So if you could think about it, we had a grounds underwater, and then we had somebody
That's
on
a
the
good
surface.
point. Yeah.
With the aqua park, which we talked about, the institution of that, all you entrepreneurs get this. We had a 10-week window for profitability.
Oh, yes, we know.
And we had hundreds of 16 to 20-some-year-olds who were operating our business.
That's right.
So, and one person, then we had two people ultimately doing the team building part with the youth. We had operators for the air, obviously, and we had people in the restaurants, to be able to do the food. But to think about the challenge of having to be profitable in 10 weeks, we're also, and the both of you know, you're in hospitality and you've got outdoor things happening, right? Pandemics and everything else that happened.
Right.
We had, just before we opened one year, we actually had a microburst that came through and ripped every inflatable out of the water.
Oh, come on.
And they were hanging over the electrical lines in the building next door. So, you not only have to spend the money to have every single thing in the water that works, you have to have a second one of every single thing in the water.
Yeah.
What an
Because
entrepreneur, Jane. I mean,
but-
you are the real
Well, it's
deal.
my partner, it wasn't just me, it was my partner and I. And I like to think I was the creative part, the part that developed new ideas and new things and came up with solutions to. And but my partner really was the accountant and the person who did make sure the staff did what managers were doing. What they were
But I
doing.
mean, it's like hundreds and hundreds of people in a season.
Hundreds and hundreds, yes.
And hearing your story, from the beginning to now, what comes to mind for me is the movie Forrest Gump. Like he did all these things. Like he got a Purple Heart. He played in the Olympics. He, fought in a war. He did like 1,000 things throughout the movie. And it's like, Jane, you have accomplished so much. You're right. We knew it was going to be hard to quantify, asking all these questions during our show because you have so much value and there's just so much to unpack.
And that's where you want. That's actually what brings us to the current business. Is that what you're saying, John?
Yeah, well, and also, you talk about values a lot. What are some of the values that you look at when you're making an investment or you're going to purchase something?
One of this is for everything in my life, but it's three things. I look for alignment, and that means does whatever I'm looking at, even for me, what I like, whether I want to invest in myself, $10,000 for a coaching certification. Alignment, does it align with my mission, vision, and values, for my life? And then the second thing on the alignment is, do I have the capability? Because I'm not a STEM person, right? So I can't be an engineer no matter what I tried to do. So does it fit with my capability, or can I learn it, right? And how about my capacity? Do I have the capacity to do one more thing? Do I have the capacity to be able to do it well? So the alignment, I would say, is number one. And the second thing is curiosity. I think for me, for an entrepreneur, curiosity is so paramount, because you have to be able to be curious about that piece of land. You have to be able to say, okay, what could I do with that? And you have to talk to people. I'm curious, if you had that piece of land, what would you do with it?
Very good.
All of that kind of stuff. So I think curiosity, my cat's worried because I think I'm going to kill the cat with curiosity. Curiosity. And I think the third thing is that a principal value for me is I'm learning based.
Yeah.
If you said to me right now, I think bread will make you lose your right arm, I could not sit here without Googling bread killing you with taking off your right arm. I have to no, I'm learning based to my core. I think my father taught me that. I went to the cash register at age 12, in the store, and I said, I don't know what to do. And he said, you don't know how to think? And yeah, he said, well, look at the register and figure it out. You can figure this out. And so whatever I was thinking of doing in my life, my mom and my dad always said, well, why not? Why not do that? And in fact, my mother's 98 said to me last night, she said, okay, you've done everything now. What's next?
I love that
So
attitude.
I loved it. I thought it was like, oh boy.
Well,
And then, so those three things, alignment and curiosity and learning based, are on a foundation of relationships.
I love it.
Hi, this is Melanie McCallan. Josh and I are just so grateful for the many investors who have already joined us at Accountable Equity. Accountable Equity is so much more than a capital group. It's really a community of accredited investors that want to learn and grow together. I just want to personally invite you, if you want to find out more about this type of investment and see if it's right for you and your family, please visit us at accountableequity.com.
Hey, it's Hal Elrod, author of The Miracle Morning, and you're listening to Capital Hacking. Enjoy.
I don't like when I lost an election, the first thing I did was I went and visit the chair of one of the local corporations, Mack Trucks, Mack Trucks, and it was Jack Curcio. And I called him and I said, I'm curious, would you be willing to meet with me and talk to me about what you think I should do next? Because I was obviously at the national level. And he said, sure, come and have dinner, and I went to see the Speaker of the House when I left Washington. What do you think, would be a good job for me? So I value the relationship
yes.
so much. And I also put my antenna up. I eliminate relationships quickly if they are not in alignment with my mission, vision, values. I don't waste time with people who are going to be naysayers or negative, or that doesn't mean if they have a different opinion from mine, I don't listen. It's just if they're not listening, then I quickly.
Jane, that's an interesting point you bring up about you're not here to be told. You're going to avoid those that are negative naysayers, but you want to hear opposite opinions, is what I'm hearing.
Oh yeah. I want to hear. It was very curious to me that I went to see the Speaker of the House, the President, the head of the Senate, Jack Curcio at Mack Truck, and they all said the same thing. It was very curious. I said to the Speaker, I said, well, what should I do? Should I be an administrative assistant to one of the, to you or to one of the top people? And he said, no, you're going to want my job.
That's right.
I went to see the person in the Senate, same thing. Oh, I could hire you, but really you're going to want my job. I went to see Jack Curcio and he said, I know you don't know anything about trucks and I'm willing to hire you. I said, well, I'm not looking for a job. He said, well, listen, hear me out. I'm willing to hire you. I know you could learn about trucks, but I know what you're going to want. I said, what's he said, my job. So the benefit of reaching out and getting opinions and getting input was they kind of all aligned. And then, of course, I ran for Congress shortly after that, right? Which was something I did not have on my agenda, and did not decide on my own. That people came to me and asked me to run. But I think if I hadn't been curious about what other people thought, I don't know that I would have. It seems so natural when someone said you're going to run, like, oh, I guess that's just part. And I've never had a resume.
No, you have this resume of life. So if you wouldn't mind, could you share with the audience more about difference maker coaching and how you want to apply that to help others?
Yeah. Well, one of the benefits of having a coaching certification, a real one, a lot of people call themselves a coach, is that you learn questioning. You learn not to give advice unless you're really asked. And even then, most people don't want advice, even if they ask for it. So I learned how to ask questions properly. I learned how, if I'm with a young person and they want to be able to be an entrepreneur, I've learned not to say I've been an entrepreneur and here's what. I've learned to say, well, what makes you think that you will be able to do this, so that I can help them judge whether they're ready to make a step like that. Yeah. And so when I teach Quantum Leap for Keller Williams, I teach it primarily to 18 to 29-year-olds. And in class, although I teach the principles of how to write a mission statement and how to recognize a limiting belief, how to eliminate limiting beliefs, how to figure out who your wealth builders are, who those relationships are. If you're 18, they're typically your parents, or somebody like that. By the time you're 25, it's often your employer who's in that position, maybe some mentors. By the time you're in your 40s, those wealth builders become very significant. They become the people who will determine whether you're just going to work for somebody else your whole life, or whether you're going to be able to have the support you need to reach out and be an entrepreneur. So I think for me, it was some of the most valuable training I've ever had in my life. It just fits into everything that I want to do. One of the things I did during the pandemic was I set up something called the Brown Bin. And I thought it was only going to be from March of the lockdown to June. And I collected everything from food. We collected 2,000 pounds of food between March and June during the pandemic. So I'm proud of myself. I actually carried 2,000 pounds of food.
Congratulations.
And I thought, yeah, I did that. It's still operating. Every single day, we have massive amounts of donations. We serve about 40 nonprofits.
Wow.
One of the things about coaching is it allowed me to ask people what they want to do and what they were willing to do. Because, a lot of places that get donations get trash. They get people. And so we had to set up and educate people on what it was that we were willing. If you wouldn't give it to your daughter, your mother, your neighbor, your cousin, then we don't want it. So that was clear what the parameters were. So that's part of my, the coaching part really helped there.
Did you do that Brown Bin? Sounds
Yeah.
almost like a collection location.
It's a supply chain. It's not a nonprofit, just a supply chain. There are just 4 of us who operate it. We literally do tons of clothes every week and everything else.
Do you, to get the locations or to get the word out, what's your technique?
We only use one app because that's all we can manage. We use Nextdoor, the Nextdoor app.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. It's a very powerful app.
I've heard this.
But Nextdoor is really a great, everything comes from there. I'm definitely not, we can't manage any more than we have.
Okay.
It's huge amount of stuff that we have. And I specifically wanted to learn how to do a supply chain, because that was another thing I had no idea how to do. And so now, some people have donations and then they just give them to a nonprofit. We do a coaching call to every nonprofit. We have clothes for a woman between the sizes of 12 and 16. What is your current need? If they say we don't have a current need, we don't put them there. Because
that's amazing.
We're not into people storing things, so we have, if they can use it now, it goes there. If they can't use it now, then maybe next time. So that's how we operate. All of that is about setting standards, aligning with our mission. Our mission is that we would provide everything we collect for free. We don't give to any organization that sells. Not that it's bad to sell. That's not our mission. That's not our goal.
So you won't take my product if you don't have a home for it.
Correct.
So that's a lot of back and forth. Sounds a little bit heavy logistics on your part, like communication.
Well, what happens is when you communicate properly, I think, what happens is the organizations start calling you.
Okay.
And they say, we need clothes from this thing. And then, so now it's a very smooth operating machine, because the organizations call us if they have needs for babies that they didn't have a month ago, but now they need all this stuff for babies. What happens next is that we put that on a needs list. Then we go on Nextdoor app and I do a post saying we need baby clothes from 0 to so, or we need diapers and wipes from, so that it's not hard. It really isn't, but it has to be. I learned this when I did that huge march that I never did before. I learned that there has to be basically an inbox for everything. It can't be random. It's got to be an inbox. It's got to have a procedure. I learned it in real estate too. Everything had a checklist. Nothing in my life in real estate did not have a checklist. Everything. So I could immediately hire my team. When I did something new, I created a checklist because I was doing it. So I knew what the steps
Oh, I
were.
like that.
I created the checklist and then I tested the checklist. Then when I wanted to hire someone to replace me, I didn't have to do near as much work because they didn't have to follow me. They didn't have to ask me a million questions. All they did was follow the checklist. Once they got the checklist down, then they could expand and create more items. And, you know,
Before I let John go, because he's great at helping us here, make sure we drive great value. What is the checklist like when people join you at Difference Maker Coaching? How do you empower them to create their own checklist?
well,
That
first of
model.
all, I give them a questionnaire. They get an extensive questionnaire about who they are. I'm a holistic coach, so I want to know if you have family. I want to know what the ages of your kids are. I want to know how long you've been single, married, or in between. I want to know all those things because there's no way you're going to be making business and life decisions outside of the context of who you are. So I ask a lot of questions about who you are. Then I ask for what the goals are, and I ask for the goals of each session. So I am not in control of the
Oh, I
coaching
get it.
session. You know, I keep it on track. I make sure we end with commitments for action, but the person decides what it is that's important to them. If I see there's a lack of alignment, you know, if someone says, oh, I need a lot of family time, I want to go to my kids' games, and then they tell me they're going to do a hospitality job, you know,
What do you say to them?
maybe that doesn't align.
Yeah, oh, you just ask enough questions that they figure it out? Because you're right. That's a great gift you're giving them, is to help them challenge their own.
Yeah, question-based coaching. That's pretty darn amazing. And you're such a great teacher. Jane, how can our listeners follow up with you?
They can email me at jwellsschooley@gmail.com. It's JWELLSSCHOOLEY@gmail.com. They can also text me at 610-390-9000. They just should tell me that they heard me speak on capital hacking so I know where it's coming from.
Awesome.
I'm going to write all that down in the show notes as well. This is great. Thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
It was fun.
Yeah,
We love you.
fun.
Thank you.
Damn straight. We just got
Yeah,
to the
buddy.
we got to the end of another great show. And everyone listening right now, you're the family and friends.
Fun.
Thanks for staying till the end.
That was so fun. And hey, hit the like, hit subscribe. We're here to serve you guys. That's why we're doing this show. Josh is not paying me. I'm doing this off of my quote unquote sweat equity because we want to make a difference in your life. And then that ripple effect will continue to touch the world.
Hey, amen, brother. Please check us out on capitalhacking.com, all the social media threads. And yes, I know you've probably already sent this episode to one of your best friends. Thank you. We love you. Just go right into your iPhone, hit the plus symbol. We'll talk to you later. See you next week.
Share.